I'm Patrick V, and you're part of the podcast Reimagining Leadership, where I'm focused on helping individuals find a better way in developing behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to want to follow your lead. Today's guests are Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Dwyer Hansen, who recently wrote a new book, Ask: The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. Now, both of these individuals have been incredibly successful throughout their careers. Mark Victor Hansen is the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series that has over 254 different books in print. He's also written dozens of other books, coupled to note here, The 1 Minute Millionaire, as well as Cracking the Millionaire Code. And Crystal Dwyer Hansen has written several books herself: Skinny Life, The Secret to Spiritual, Physical, and Emotional Fitness, Pure Thoughts for Pure Results, and How Messy Thinking Can Make or Break Your Life. What's so important about this book that we're going to talk about today is really we're in a state right now in terms of a pandemic, a crisis, however you want to look at this, that the ability to ask good questions of ourselves really, to me, is the way that we positively find a solution to the challenges that we're dealing with, whether it's the stress, the finances, the fear, whatever that might be. That the better we are at understanding how to ask questions, the more equipped we're going to be for navigating this challenge that we're experiencing successfully. And that's what this book is going to talk about. So let's get into it. Mark and Crystal, thank you so much for being on the Reimagining Leadership podcast. I've already had the opportunity to read your book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And knowing both of you, how successful you've been in terms of the number of books that you've written, I couldn't list them all or we wouldn't be able to do the podcast. From that standpoint, why this book and why now?
What happens is that Crystal and I have traveled everywhere. We've been to 80 countries. And what we discovered, we've met a lot of really wonderful people. They're talented, they're educated, they're likable. But what we looked at and discerned was there's a big difference between those who are a little successful and those that are vastly successful. And those that are vastly successful have one skill level. They have learned how to be what we now call master askers. And we want everyone to understand that you can ask, because success comes out of progressive realization of a worthwhile goal. Learn to ask so you get to your destiny.
And actually, wasn't it one of your grandchildren that started out really with the idea of the question?
Yes, exactly, little Everett. So we had kicked around the idea. We started, mulling over this book that we thought was, as we started to ponder the power of asking, particularly in our own lives, we started thinking back about how it's influenced us so much, gotten us through personal crises and things like that. And so we had just started forming our ideas for the book, and we'd gone to Hawaii on vacation. Everett had just gotten a Gizmo watch for Christmas. And so all of a sudden, and he only had like 5 people in the watch that he could call. It's his grandparents and his parents, and, it's for his own safety, but he thought it was so cool. So all of a sudden, Mark gets a call on his cell phone, and it's, Everett's Gizmo watch coming up on his cell phone. It's like, "Hey, Ev, how you doing?" And he's like, "Good, Grampy. Can I talk to you about something really important?"
It's 6 years old.
"Yeah, buddy, where are you?" And he's like, "Well, I've gone into the closet because it's really noisy out there because everyone was celebrating for Christmas." He said, "Those chicken soup books that you've been writing?" And Mark said, yeah, of course I do." And he goes, "Well, I really like those, Grampy." He's like, "Well, I didn't know that ever." We thought he was too young to be reading the chicken soup books, so we never had this conversation. And he goes, "So, Grampy, can I ask you a question?" He's like, "Sure, of course, you can ask me anything, always." And he said, "Are you and Mimi going to write any more books?" And he said, "Yeah, I think we're in the middle of writing one now. We're thinking of a book called Ask." He goes, "Okay, so can I write that book with you?" And so we just were like, was this the perfect story?
Yeah.
Because no shame, no fear. He was very serious. He had strong conviction, a lot of confidence, not entitled, but just very sincere about, could I do this with you? It's a great idea. And we thought, it got us thinking, and then we started doing more research about, why are children so unafraid to ask? And it's because we all come into this world, Patrick, with that natural human spirit. We want to know what, when, where, and we want more, more, more. And we just keep asking for it. And it's a beautiful thing. And then over time with life, that kind of gets crushed out of us. We go to school, you're told to zip it up, the teacher's in charge, don't ask even unless you're called on. You go out in the world, or you share your ideas, or you ask for things, and maybe you get rejected or embarrassed or shut down. And then, jobs, a lot of, employers are just not open to taking feedback or too many questions. It's like, just do what you're told, whether it's your job or military. And over time, people lose their confidence in asking. They lose their ability to ask, and it becomes crush. And we talk a little bit more about that in the book, in the 7 roadblocks to asking.
Yeah, I think that is so interesting, right? We do get it squeezed out of us. We hear so many times about what we can't do. Oh, that's a silly thought, or, stop daydreaming, or whatever it might be. And I certainly remember that. When I think of this book as I was reading it, and the stories were fabulous in it, to me, it's like the combination of, as I was writing down, a Swiss Army knife, a blueprint, and an owner's manual. And what I mean by that is it's a Swiss Army knife in terms of asking. It gives you all of the different ways that you can ask, right? Anything that you need to ask for. And to me, the blueprint of that, as I had sort of made some notes, is whether it's personal or purpose or relationship or health, those are the blueprints. And then the owner's manual to me was that what gets in the way, those 7 things that you listed of, it's almost like just like any appliance that you buy or whatever, you go to the back of it and say, if I'm not getting what I need, or if this isn't doing what it needs to do, what are the recommendations? And I think those 7 roadblocks really do that. What's getting in the way of me asking good questions?
Exactly. And what happens is we think, I love every one of those little things that you hit, the Swiss Army knife, because that's what happens is all of us know the line, ask and you shall receive.
Yeah.
But nowhere ever has anyone written a book on ask. I mean, we were a little dumbfounded that we could get that title and take ownership of it. Yeah. And then we did the subtitle, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny, because we're saying, hey, wait a second, Patrick, if you're alive, you have a destiny. Mm-hmm. Now, it's probably not fulfilled. And yes, you've been incarcerated a little bit, government imposed. But when that releases, we're saying, what more important thing to do is there than ask? Because, we've got Socrates in here, and Socrates says the unexamined life is not worth living, and the unexamined leadership is not worth having. And leadership starts top down, inside out. It's got to be self-leadership before it's any other kind of leadership. You got to ask yourself, what kind of leader am I going to be? What kind of person am I going to be? How am I going to take leadership in a family role, a business role, a life role, a spiritual role, a charitable role, all of which we looked at, and we said, the people that really make it are master askers.
Yeah. Again, you do outline that. One of the quotes that I had written down that I loved was, he who asks a question is a fool for 5 minutes. He who doesn't remains a fool forever. The Chinese proverb. And to me, that speaks to this.
Isn't that true? And it's so funny because we did the research. We did a lot of research for this book. And the studies show, when it comes to asking others for things, for help or insight or whatever you're asking for, people are really scared. Yeah. But the research shows that you're 80% likely to get your request granted if you just ask. You're 80% more likely. But we're so frightened of this. That's why we really need to study those roadblocks and identify which one or ones we have, which ones we're carrying around, because most of us have at least one or more of those. Yeah. And we use some beautiful stories even in those roadblocks, just examples of people's personal journeys, because stories are powerful. They're really become metaphors for our own lives. And a metaphor is a pattern for our brain to follow. Our brain works in patterns. So when we can experience something through someone else's story, we immediately experience that metaphor and that pattern. And we learn so much more quickly through stories. And then the emotions of the stories too, because everything we learn with emotion creates much stronger memory. It creates stronger memory in our mind, but also stronger memory in our body. As a transformational life coach and hypnotherapist, I do this mind stuff a lot. Yeah. And it's a very real thing. So we felt like it was so important to include all these stories. We did 26 interviews for the book and a lot of research, and it's really fun. The other thing we discovered about asking others and just being a good question asker is those people who are better askers, in other words, in a business setting, and they even did it in a dating setting, are more likable and just perceived to be more intelligent, more likable, more intelligent, just a better partner in general.
Yeah, I love that when you were talking about the research that you've done for this, because that was one of the things that I'd written down was the Harvard study on asking and liking, how when we ask better questions of individuals, it creates an environment of liking. And I do a lot of work in leadership and team development for organizations. And that's one of the things that we will talk about in terms of, we know from brain scans and images that people like to talk about themselves. That's the pleasure part of our brain lights up when we are asked questions to talk about ourselves. So it falls in line, that research. I hadn't seen that study either, and I loved it.
Isn't it fantastic?
Yeah, I actually printed it off.
And it's so important in that they also talk about, listening to the responses when you're asking questions, listening to the responses, and go deeper into that conversation. It's not like, instead of, okay, Patrick, where are you from? I'm from Wisconsin or whatever. Oh, is it, where in Wisconsin? Is it, how many people are in your family? Instead of going, where are you from? Wisconsin. Okay. What do you do for a living? You want to go deeper into people's answers. People feel that connection and trust so much faster. Yeah. And that's part of the whole asking journey, is really opening up to one another more and being more curious about each other. In some ways, we talk about, too isolated to ask, and social media has us all, superficially connected, but really kind of isolated. So much about, oh, am I being seen or heard? And not really working on creating those bonds with other people that you create through asking, through asking, and even granting other people's wishes.
There were 3 things that you mentioned in terms of asking, around clear communication, commitment to what you want, and then detachment from the outcome. I was wondering, could you speak to that? Because I think that those 3 are so important.
So the 3 things are, you got to ask yourself, ask others, and ask God. I hope I'm triggering
and that one too, yeah.
Yeah. So what happened is that when I went bankrupt in 1974 and I hung out sleeping in a sleeping bag in front of another guy's room for 6 months and going, oh my gosh, I thought my self-worth and net worth were the same, and hiding under the covers. But finally I figured out, I'm asking myself, what do I want to do? Well, I want to be a speaker. I go to my 3 roommates in Hicksville, Long Island, New York, and I say, any of you guys know somebody that's young, that's not a doctor, a lawyer, a famous person, a celebrity that is making money? The guy said, oh yeah, he's a few years older than you. He's up in Hauppauge, Long Island, New York. He's talking to us realtors. Here's my ticket. You go and sit in my place. Just tell him you're me. I go out there in 3 hours. The guy mesmerized us. I go up to him. His name's Chip Collins. I ask him, I say, can I take you to lunch? He said, I love somebody to buy me lunch. I said, can I ask you how to do this business? He said, you can, but you're not going to make it. 1 in 1,000 to make it. It's a tough business, kid. I said, well, let me worry about that. He said, well, you stay out of real estate because I own this market in 5 boroughs in New York. You do life insurance. I'll tell you what to do, what to say. And I asked him, and I wrote everything. I memorized it. The next day I go out. Long story short, the first 3 years I did 1,000 talks a year, because if you're going to ask, then you got to, the second thing is you got to massive action, which is I think what you're doing. And only Tony Robbins and I, as far as I know, ever did 1,000 talks a year. I'd do them at 6 in the morning, 10 in the morning,
which is that's amazing.
8 at night, 9 at night, whatever they wanted, I'd do, and then sell in between, and more talks, because I was alone and I had nothing else to do, and I knew I wanted to do it. And then all of a sudden, I said, well, wow, they all say they want this story in a book. So I did my first multi-authored book by asking 14 people to cooperate with me, called Stand Up, Speak Out, and Win. And it went like a rocket. We sold 20,000 copies at $10 each. I made $200,000 in 1974. I thought I had arrived, Patrick, died, and gone to heaven, because they're asking for my autograph. And I said, this is my bestseller. It's not the bestseller, son. It's my bestseller. It's my bestseller. And they all laughed and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm asking you to buy one. And almost, the first time I ever showed the book, I sold 37 out of 37 people in the room. It was just, I thought, oh yeah, this is good.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
I wanted to just follow up on that. So that commitment and detachment, and I think Mark has exemplified that so much in his asking journey to be an author, because they did get rejected for the Chicken Soup for the Soul books 144 times. And so you're going to get rejection. You need to understand that. So you need to commit to what you want. You need to commit to the asking journey. You need to commit to yourself that you're going to move forward, and expect some rejection. Yeah. And so we have a great story in the book. A guy named Charlie Green submitted it, and he said that he saw Mark speak at a church in the Midwest. And he said, Mark gave this amazing talk, and everyone was just astounded. And then he stands up after, and he waves this manuscript in the air, and he said, I'm asking you to pray for me that this book will get made. He said, we're looking for a publisher. And he goes, I'd like to ask for your prayers, and I'd also like to ask you to fill out this order form and put your credit card down, and I promise you when it gets published, we'll send you the book. And Charlie said, I was amazed that every single one of us did what Mark asked, because he said he was so committed to getting what he wanted. We felt his passion. We felt his purpose. And so we did it. And at the same time, you realize Mark had to be so detached from the answers he was getting, because all those rejections, you literally have to detach. You have to say, okay, keep moving, next.
Yeah.
Favorite word, next.
Yeah. It's funny. My background growing up, I was in sales. I was in biotech sales. I think being the youngest of 10 too, hearing no was not really a big deal. That's just something you deal with. It just goes right off the other side of you. You just keep moving, next, move on. But I do think that's a real struggle for a lot of individuals, that one, asking a good question, what do you want? I think that can be, and I know it's been a struggle for me at times when I haven't been clear in terms of what I want, being able to ask a well-structured question in terms of what is it that I want?
Right. And so it's really important to spend time with yourself. That's why we say the first part of the asking journey is really spending time with yourself, asking yourself, because you need to become clear. We see that people just we all kind of just start thundering through our lives and we're just doing our routine day after day, and life's coming at us and we're kind of trying to keep all the balls in the air, but we're not taking that personal time to ask ourselves, to do that deep reflection, and ask those reflective questions that will reveal so much to us about ourselves. And the other research we did is just when you ask yourself questions, a different part of your brain lights up, and it's a part of your brain that does critical thinking. Right. So your brain goes to work for you when you start to ask questions, and question by question, answer by answer, you'll start to come up with a plan, or an illumination will come to you, or a solution will come to you, or a new idea that you hadn't thought of before. But that doesn't happen if you just keep powering through your life, doing what you're doing and not really being satisfied with it. You have to stop. You have to sit down, take those 15 minutes minimum with yourself every single day. We like the morning. We do this prayer and meditation time. We try to do an hour, but at the very least, if we're incredibly busy, we get at least 15 minutes. And we'll get up earlier to make sure we get that in, because it's that important. And we ask each other questions, we ask ourselves questions, and then we contemplate and reflect and check in with ourselves and see, you readjust. You have to adjust your course. And the easiest way to do that is to ask questions. What's working? What's not working? Are we liking this? Is this relationship good? How would we improve it? What are the goals we're trying to achieve this week? Are we even in touch with them? Just asking those questions, pulls you back into the plan.
Yeah. Do you mind if I take a step back for a minute? Because again, I think people listening or watching you look and say, well, Mark and Crystal, they can do it. They're super successful, but I can't do it. I can't do it. And not realizing that most of the very successful people that I've interviewed and talked to all have a similar story, that they started out probably with some tremendous challenges that they overcame. And I'm wondering, for both of you, would you share one of those challenges for you that helps people to recognize, like, you're just like we were. We can do that too.
Yeah, no, it's so true, Patrick. It's easy because we do think that. We think when someone's successful, we look at them and go, gosh, they just had it so easy. I wish I were like that. They just don't have the problems I have. But no, we've had tremendous, challenges individually and together through things, that we've had to work through. But for me, I think one of the biggest personal challenges that I ever experienced was when I was very young. I was 21 years old. I was one of those kids who found high school to be really easy. So I accelerated my curriculum and graduated at age 16 and married my boyfriend, who was 5 years older. Probably not a great plan, right? So then 2.5 years later, I'm alone in a new city, divorced, baby on my hip, no job, no family or friends, and absolutely no idea what I was going to do next. I mean, it was really a bad time for me. And, I came from this family, big family, kind of pioneering family, like, you make your bed, figure out how to sleep in it, So I just didn't even think to ask my parents for, come home and be all victimized. And the only thing I could do is think of getting food stamps. So I ordered, I applied for food stamps. And the day that I showed up at the grocery store for the first time when I received those food stamps. I was standing in the grocery store line, ready to turn those over. And all of a sudden, I had this huge epiphany. And this question dropped in my mind. And it said, how did I get here? And then followed by a second question that said, are you really doing everything you can to get out of this? Or are you taking the easy way out? And I knew the minute that question came in my mind, I knew the answer. I wasn't doing everything I could to get myself out of this. And so all of a sudden I felt this intense conviction. I almost felt like this light was shining on me, like, you know what? As I was turning those food stamps over, I said, this will not be my future. I'm saying that to myself. I still remember that moment looking at the woman, thinking to myself, this will not be my future as I hand those over to her. Well, I went back to my little tiny apartment where I was getting eviction notices every month. And I started asking myself, you know, how can I work tomorrow? Where can I go to work tomorrow and start earning money? And I'd heard on the radio, temporary service agencies like Kelly Services. So I called them. They said, fill out these applications. I did. And we said, we'll send you job opportunities, every day you can say yes or no. So I started getting some opportunities. Then I realized there were 2 more temp service agencies that I could apply to. So I did that because I figured I'd get a better selection of jobs to choose from. So I started taking those jobs and I was working, filling in at attorneys' offices or setting up booths in malls or, working in sales at conventions that would come into town. And I started to learn something about myself. And I learned that, I really like business and I like sales and I was pretty good at it. And that I really like people and it was fun to be a part of, a team or work with people. I just love it. And so I decided to put myself through real estate school. So, by then I saved enough money, went to real estate school. So in the meantime, I've been approached a couple of times. People said, you should go model. So I approached the modeling agencies and asked them if they'd sign me. Unfortunately, the larger one in our valley said yes. So I did a couple of television commercials and fortunately they went national. So I started getting residuals. So literally about a year and a half, maybe a little more after that time where I was turning over those food stamps, I was working for the biggest home builder in our valley and I became the #1 realtor and I was getting my residuals and I had to join Screen Actors Guild because they made you do that if you were making so much money and a certain amount of money in residuals, you joined the union, but they pay great benefits. So my little boy and I got like amazing insurance benefits. And I often thought back, I reflect back on that time in my life. I did again and again. What if it would have been so easy for me, Patrick, just to kind of cave into my misery? Because it was bad. I mean, I was crying on my pillow every night. As easy as this process sounds now, it was not easy. It took so much. It was tough and scary. And it would have been so easy to cave in. And that's what I'm telling everybody out there. We can't cave into it. We can't cave into it when it's there. It's easy to cave into. I know it's hard. But I'm telling you, start asking yourself those questions. I'm so thankful I asked myself the tough questions because I knew, was I doing the best I could? No, I wasn't. I knew it. And I'm thankful that I was able to answer them honestly because part of the question process is to answer the questions honestly when they come up. Really get real with yourself. And if you can do that, your life will really change. You'll find a new strength inside of you that you didn't know before.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned in the book, and I think it was even might be in the preface to it, but it says that the ability to ask questions, it's the only language to which the universe can deliver a solution, understanding, illumination, or a plan, which is exactly what happened.
You were reiterating that exactly. So when I was 9 years old, I didn't quite understand that my lovely blue-collar parents, my daddy and mommy owned a little bakery, but you don't make any money selling rolls at 5 cents. It just isn't in the cards. And I really wanted this bicycle, the low-handlebar racing bicycles. They weren't in the U.S. yet, but today, a Trek bike's like $4,000 to $7,000, depends on what you want. And obviously, I wanted mine tricked out, of course, and my dad couldn't afford it. I didn't understand that, and I kept asking and asking. He said, when you're 21, boy. And I said, I got him down to 16 and it wasn't working. So I thought, well, I'm a Boy Scout and it says in the back of Boy Scout magazine, I can sell greeting cards on consignment. I can afford that because that means they give them to me. I sell it. I send them half the money and I'm home. So I asked Dad, I said, can I have it if I earn it myself? Because he said, free enterprise means the more enterprising you are, the freer you are, son. never thinking that I could turn around that kind of money. Well, I started selling in not far from you, and the snow was deep that year in Waukegan, Illinois, outside of Chicago. Snow is deep. I go up to my neighbors. I get a big furry mitt and a red, cold face. And I go like this, wiping my nose, and say to these lovely neighbor ladies, I'm earning my own bicycle by selling these Christmas cards. Would you like one box or two? Most of them took two for $4 because it was, I got to help the kid out. It's Christmas time. You know, I sold 376 boxes of Christmas cards in 1 month. Did I want to sell Christmas cards? No. All I wanted was that bicycle, and I got it. And Dad took half that money. And like your son graduated yesterday, I had to put it in my college fund because he couldn't see how he was going to pay for it. So he said, look, you're going to learn how to pay for it yourself. And I am so thankful for those early sales lessons where, you know, my mom said, smile real big and ASK and you'll GET the business.
Right. It's two examples of how this actually does work from a very early age.
And by the way, let me underwrite what you're saying, though. It works for everybody who will work it. But nobody has ever written a book that we know of to inspire people to use the only methodology that works. And you don't have to, you start with no money. You don't have to start with any skill. You don't have to have any particular talent. You don't have to have graduated from college, but you have to learn this skill, whether you're educated or uneducated, whether you're skilled or unskilled, talented or untalented. This will take you to wherever you want to go.
It really is amazing as you read through this too. Now, again, thinking of the environment that we're in right now, right? I think this book couldn't come out at a better time in regards to how people are experiencing things, because I will tell you, it doesn't take much to turn on the news or read anything that's been printed. The questions that are being asked are not very good questions in terms of creating a positive environment.
Right.
So let me just tell you, we got a story in there by Jim Stovall, who Stovall is 19 years old. He spent his whole life in running, exercising, being bigger than a house, strong, fast, wants to be an NFL player. Sure enough, he gets recruited. Goes to the medical, and the doctor comes back shaking his head. And Jim goes, oh my gosh, this isn't going to be good. He said, look, kid, 6 months from now, you're going to be permanently and forever blind. Oh my gosh, talk about crushing a kid's spirit. He's self-incarcerated in a little 9x12 room with only three things: a radio, a television, and a telephone, and complaining and moaning. And his mommy says, hey, Jimmy, go to the blind meeting. Maybe they can help you. Well, it's an echo chamber of negativity. But fortuitously, he sits next to a woman named Kathy, who is a blind stenographer for a legal firm. And they're starting to chat. And he says, boy, you know, I used to love to watch thrillers and watch somebody throw a right hook, but I can't see it anymore. I wish somebody would do something about that. She elbows him, and this is the lever for everybody listening, says, because you can all do what he and she did, said, look, we're somebody. Why can't we fix this? Why can't we fix this? And all of a sudden the light bulbs went in his head. He said, yeah. And long story, very, very short, they created narrative television. Now, because we're sighted, we don't see it, but 14 million people paid $10 a month for a streaming service called Narrative TV. Then he writes a book. That's when I get introduced to him, and I was amazed. I was selling 15 million books a year. I didn't have time to look at somebody else, but I read it, and I wrote the forward and the backward and the back, and said, this book is so clear, it has to be a movie. He says if he lives 100 years, he can't thank me enough for writing that, because it became a movie, made $100 million. And so we interviewed him for the book, and he said the two last lines. He's the wisest, I've never physically met him, telephone guy I've ever talked to. He says, I now write books that I can't read, and I now make movies that I can't see. So if you take that and look at Joseph and the many-colored coat story in the Bible, it says, what somebody else meant for your harm, God meant for your good. Look, nobody wants to be blind, but he has made it an asset and a resource to his ascent. We're saying all of us have to right now take crisis, because 8 billion of us are in crisis mode, and turn it into, like the yin and yang says, into great opportunity. So get the biggest crisis. You got to ask yourself, how am I going to take advantage of this biggest opportunity and source and serve and fix something that needs to get fixed and get paid substantially for it.
Do you think not enough people look at it in terms of practicing gratitude? You have something that you do in the morning in terms of your routines that you do?
I think you're so right, Patrick. And that's what we do when things are out of whack, and we'll even do it even if we're having a bad day, we're just like, things are getting off kilter. If you go to, that quiet space, because our brains, especially in an environment like this, we have all this negativity. Everything's bad, bad, bad. The news, the media wants us, they won't tell us anything but negative
Right.
news. And people are tuning in way too much because we're all home listening. And when we do that, it starts to shut us down. It is feeding our brains in the way that is the opposite of how we need our brains to be fed. When you want something in life, and I know this as an expert in this area because I've studied the brain for a decade and a half, you need to tune your brain into what you want. You need to think those thoughts every day. You need to envision a perfect outcome for yourself. You need to ask for exactly what you want. But we're seeing this negative, this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. So people start just like Jim, hearing the echo chamber. We don't have this, and we don't have that. You are inputting the opposite of what you really want in life. So that one of the quickest, ways to change that is to go take some time, that quiet time again, and start giving thanks for every little thing you have. I am so thankful I have vision so I can see. I'm not blind, I can see. I have two hands, I have two arms, I have two legs. There are plenty of people out there who don't. I have a great mind. I can think. I'm living in this country where we have freedom. I can create whatever I want. I can be whatever I want to be. Again and again, your family, your kids, your friends, so much to be thankful for, because we start missing all that. We start missing, and as we miss it, the more we miss it, we're really like a magnet for what we have in life. We are the attractor field. Okay. So if you can't even see what you already have, how is more going to come to you? Because you could get so much more than you have right now, and you still won't see it if you don't practice gratitude. If you don't practice the acknowledgement, gratitude is the acknowledgement of every single thing you have. And if we start with that, you start off by feeling rich. And then you can ask for more riches in your life, because there's nothing wrong with asking for riches. There's nothing wrong with asking for abundance. It's what children do. It's what we were born to do with that human spirit that's gotten crushed out of us. But we need to focus on all the richness that we have so we become a great magnet for the things we want.
I completely agree. I think it feels like a dance at times where it's expectation is I want more, but gratitude is I'm happy for the journey and where I am in the moment. It's not comparing myself to somebody else, but it's saying I want more things. I'll be motivated maybe to chase somebody else. I'm a runner. If I see somebody out there, I will try and catch them but I don't go home deflated if I didn't, because it was like a rabbit for me. You know what I mean?
I love that.
But there's a dance to it. There's expectation, but there's gratitude.
We're going to request everybody shuts down negative news to 15 minutes a day. Yeah, you got to know, but you don't need, the average American's listening 2.5 hours a day.
Crazy.
And the thing that when I went bankrupt and was upside down in 1974, fortuitously, I stopped reading the New York Times because I live in New York. All the bad news fit to print it's the truth. And, all the things that are going wrong, because news intrinsically has got to be a crisis, right? And so if you start studying positive stuff, listening to the tapes, watching our stuff on YouTube, all that kind of stuff, listening to podcasts like yours, it gives you what Zig Ziglar used to call a checkup for the neck up. And one last thing, and there are not one crisis, but three. There's a physical crisis. There's some ways out of that. There's the fear crisis, which is what we're trying to cover here today. And then the third crisis is the economic crisis. And if you cover your fears, you'll make them disappear. Like Napoleon Hill wrote all the firesides at you. You have nothing to fear but fear itself. He wrote for FDR. And confront your fears and make it disappear. And the only way we think it works is if you ask. So may I ask you boldly? We want to ask every one of your people to get a copy of Ask, and the only bookstore that's open more or less is Amazon, and then send a receipt to markvictorhansen.com, reception at markvictorhansen.com, and we're going to invite you to.
We're going to have the biggest book club discussion ever. We thought that would be so much fun.
I love it.
We want people to get together. We want you to read this book, and then let's go. We're going to do a big private, group, like a big private Facebook group, and invite everybody in. Have this discussion and see how this applies in your life. And we think that really helps people, move forward and feel better. We're trying to contribute as much as we can to help people really move forward after this crisis and really become the best they can be. And we're, like you said, Patrick, we're so thankful our book came out at this time. And it's funny because a lot of publishers started postponing the release of all their books. And we did have that discussion because ours was to release on April 28th. I mean, right in the middle of the pandemic. And we said, what are we going to do? Are we going to postpone? And he said, no, basically the horses left the gate already. We're just going to plow forward, not knowing. And we swear, I think that's the way God wanted it, because we have done so many podcasts and the feedback we're getting from people is like so much gratitude for having this message right now.
Yeah. So I told you before we started this that you were kind enough to send me a PDF copy of it to read prior to this. I actually bought the book, and my son graduated this year from college this week, actually. And I'm giving the copy to him because I think it's a great, he's had 4 years of formal education. This to me is a life education in this. And as well, when you're talking about the pandemic and not potentially bringing this book out at this point, I really think the opposite, that this to me is a treatment. It's like a therapy for what's, I think, more damaging to us right now as a society. It's what mentally is going on with us and emotionally. And this book addresses that.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. And we're so thankful. Honestly, I'm really, I don't know why ours came out, but we are really giving thanks that it did, because I think it's the most important time it could ever have come out. So thank you for that. And
then let me just make your thought and macroize it, or make it bigger if you don't mind, and say that what's true is that everyone should get all the academic education they've got. And I've obviously got a really good one and got to spend time in graduate school, the smartest kind of planet, Buckminster Fuller, Einstein's best student, who had 40 books and geodesic domes and inventions and was a Leonardo da Vinci of our time, and said, let's make the world work for 100% of humanity. That is an academic education. What you said just now, though, is that everyone's got to have a self-help action education so they become self-determining. Because 30 million Americans are not, NOT, going to have a job when this is over. Yeah. And I'm telling you that there's a book we'll give you free if they go to markvictorhansen.com in a week. We'll have it up, called How to Be Up and Down Times. And I teach 7 businesses that are going to do $50 trillion in this decade, one of which we're advisors to, called QCI in Michigan. The guy spent $300 million, 20 years, figuring out how to take all garbage, turn it into a resource. Now he needs to hire 22 million people once Michigan's governor releases people back to freedom again. And it's amazing, because all of us create 5 pounds of garbage a day, whether you want to or not. It's just what is, right? And every landfill, 10,000 landfills in America are full. We can't ship it anywhere anymore. What he figured out how to do is, with every molecule, every atom, turn metal back to metal, glass back to glass, plastic, and water back to water. It's exciting if you're awake, and people have got to say, I did that, but you might have to pivot. You might have to reinvent yourself. You got to ask yourself, how am I going to re-engineer myself and revitalize myself to new leadership?
Ask new questions.
Without question. I will say one last thing that reminds me of that, of how do you take this and actually put it into action, is I know that myself, I don't want to be Peter Smith.
Oh, Peter Smith, isn't that the most tragic? Yeah, the brilliant genius guy. None of us wants to be Peter Smith.
Right, that practiced and had all the preparation, but never did anything.
All the education, just the smartest guy in the world, but could never, next year.
Yeah. And there's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Right, and Zig Ziglar used to say exactly in that point, someday I'm going to do. There is no someday. There's Monday, Tuesday, but there's no someday. There's today.
I don't know who said this, but I remember somebody else saying that person has a lot of potential, which means they haven't done anything yet.
And by the way, hitchhiking on that, with your permission, is that nobody should be buried with their potential in them, their music in them, their books in them, their invention in them, their thinking in them, their love of their life, and all that. It's critical.
And like Rita Davenport says in the other story, in one of the other stories in the book, which I love her story, get your ass in gear. I love that a lot.
That is great.
Right?
That is great. Yeah.
We need to
well, listen, I want to thank you both for taking the time to speak about such an important book. I really have appreciated reading it, having the conversation with you, and certainly looking forward to sharing it with my oldest son too.
Thank you, Excellent. Patrick. Wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you, sir.
Mark and Crystal have really put together an incredibly valuable book. As I had mentioned, to me, it feels like a Swiss Army knife, a blueprint, and an owner's manual for how you ask effective questions. And that really is going to be the key to getting out of this, or to whatever challenge comes up, whether it's today or in 2 years or in 5 years. It really is about asking better questions. And we all have the ability to do that. And this book provides a structure to how you do that most effectively. If you know somebody that would benefit from hearing this episode, I'd ask you forward it on to them. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and it would mean the world to me if you would leave a rating or a comment on this or any other episode. And until our next episode, I hope you're able to rise above your best. Peace.